Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So as you guys can see, we're back with the patch 3.2 tier list, and of course, I've started talking after the intro, so you guys can read it. I was considering talking during the intro, but I didn't want to interrupt the reading. So anyways, we're gonna start talking about the tier list. So basically, the main changes in patch 3.2 are in the jungle and the ADC role, which you guys will see later. But here we're going to be covering the Baron lane. So Baron lane, honestly, not too much changes from patch 3.1b. So Camille, still the best in my opinion. Renekton and Set also two of the best Baron laners. Now Darius, in my opinion, most people put him like in S+ and think he's one of the best. But in my opinion, I do think he's really good, but he is not the best 1v1. He's really great in team fights, but he kind of relies on the enemy team misplaying and letting you stack up on them more than your own skill. So I think that just because you rely on enemy misplays, I don't quite think Darius is all the way up there in my opinion. But I still think he's somewhere in between S+ and S. I don't think he's quite that bad to be in S, but not really good enough to crack S+, at least not in my opinion. Now, Fiora, as we discussed in the previous tier list, that double range nerf on both the dash distance and as well as the lunge range really hurt her a lot. And I think S might be generous. I think she might even be A+, but I really don't think she is very good at the moment. So another change we had in this patch is Akali. So Akali, of course, got a couple of adjustments, but basically overall with the new adjustments, she has a lot more energy to work with now, especially when you go fleet footwork, which of course did get adjusted to give energy as well. So fleet footwork Akali is probably the way to go. Conquer is a tad greedy. You do more damage, of course, but you really don't have the energy. So at the end of the day, more damage with less energy equals to less casting of spells, but more damage per cast. Whereas going fleet gives you less damage per cast, but more casts because you have more energy. You guys might have to replay that, but whatever I said there makes sense. So anyways, I think fleet is probably the better way to go on Akali. And I think that actually makes Baron lane Akali better because you are in more prolonged fights in the Baron lane, but the problem still remains the same, where you cannot kill people very easily even in prolonged fights because generally everybody above her and on her tier are all relatively tanky. Maybe the squishiest character you would see is either AP Gragas or Graves, probably the two squishiest out of all the champs here, but by and large, all the champs are pretty tanky. It's really hard to kill people, so I don't think she's that good in the Baron lane compared to the mid lane, but hey, she's not bad. So another notable pick here is Olaf. Olaf has been pretty solid for a long time now, way better in the jungle, but in the Baron lane with Lethal Tempo as his new rune of choice, he is still, he's still really good, especially into certain matchups where he's really good 1v1, of course. So into certain matchups that are melee that they want to fight you 1v1, Olaf is a pretty good pick. Now Jax, another lethal tempo user, but Tryndamere as well, but I really don't think Jax and Tryndamere move up from the A tier even though they have these two buffs, because both of them are really weak in the early game, and a lot of champions above them are pretty strong in the early game. Like think about, against like a Camille or Renekton, a Set early game, you'll get destroyed. Okay, maybe Jax against Camille, not really because you are a Camille counter, but by and large, like into Jace, into Irelia, into Riven, Garen even, Fiora, Wukong even maybe, like basically into all the meta champions. They really suck early game and they're gonna get destroyed. So I really can't in good conscience put them any higher than A. I still think that they are monsters late game, but their early game is simply too bad. Now Nasus, we all know he has the problem with stacking, but if you manage to stack, he is gonna be great. So I'm not gonna put him too high, not gonna put him too low. Yasuo with Lethal Tempo is a lot better. We'll discuss a bit more about him in the mid lane, but same problem as Akali, he can't really quite secure kills in the top lane. Now Kayle, because of Lethal Tempo, I don't quite think she's trash tier anymore, because surprisingly Kayle with Lethal Tempo is obviously, okay, not surprising that she's better, but it's surprising how in the games that I fought against Kayle, I find that she dies a lot less and she tends to carry harder with the Lethal Tempo. So I am cutting her a little bit of slack here and moving her up from the trash tier into the C tier. But we will be closely monitoring Kayle if she's even played, and we'll be seeing in the next patch if I'll move her back down. So anyways, that is it for the Baron lane. Now we can talk about the jungle. Alright, so tons to discuss in the jungle. Now, the main three big changes is number one, both buffs got more health, so they're tankier. Number two, red buff has a 30% extra armor, and blue buff has 30% extra MR, so they're tankier yet again. And thirdly, red buff only does 50% damage to all jungle camps. So what does this mean? Number one, it's going to be harder to clear both buffs. Number two, it's going to be hard to clear all camps because red buff doesn't burn all camps for the full damage anymore. Now, what is the implications of this? Basically, clearing the jungle just got a whole lot harder. Now, clearing the jungle in Wild Rift starts to feel like clearing the jungle in League PC. At least the time where I played League PC and I was a jungler in League PC, where unless you're playing like a champion, let's not get into League PC champions, but most jungle champions, when you clear like your first buff, you're gonna be at like about 1/3 to 1/4 health, and then you're gonna move onto your next camp, something like that. Now it's relatively the same in Wild Rift. When you clear your first camp, even with a leash, you're gonna be like at around 1/3 health, or like even a quarter health. Like I've even had a match where I nearly died to the first buff when I played Echo, but we'll talk about Echo a little bit later on. But in all seriousness, the jungle just got a whole lot harder to clear. So my personal prediction for the jungle meta is there's gonna be invading really soon. Now we don't really see level 1 invades in Wild Rift at all, basically. But I think that because of how how tanky the first buff is now, I think you could see like delayed invades happening and becoming meta sooner or later, because like you're so low after like taking the first buff, or not even taking, but in the process of taking, you drop below half health. Imagine if an enemy shows up, like kills you and then smites your buff and takes it, or something like that. Or an enemy, plus their bot lane shows up, steals your buff, that kind of deal. So I think that could be really the case. But either way, it's kind of same all across the board for all junglers about how hard it is to clear the jungle. So it doesn't affect the jungle tier list too much, but it will in some ways. Now Lee Sin, Kha'Zix, still the two best junglers in the game. Really aggressive and really good ganking junglers. But the caveat with that is that now with the buffs being so tanky, Lee Sin and Kha'Zix are going to be a bit lower, so their ganks are going to be a little bit worse. But they're still really strong champions. I still think they're up there. Olaf has a better jungle clear because he has better sustain, and of course he is still absolutely OP with his Ragnarok ultimate, immuning CC, etc. Now the reason why I still have Nunu in S+ tier despite him already having a horrible clear is because Nunu is a ganking jungler. So really on Nunu you can really just go buff to buff with like one camp in between maybe, and you can just start ganking and pretty much ignore your jungle camps, only care about really your buffs when they come back up, and you just perma-gank non-stop. Now that's kind of Nunu's playstyle, so I think that the jungle changes affect him probably one of the least, so I still think that Nunu is kind of in the S+ tier. Now, next up in the S tier, most of the champs there remain relatively the same from the last patch, and not too much to discuss. But what we can discuss is Graves and Morgana. Now, the only reason why Graves and Morgana are now in the S tier is because they are amazing at farming the jungle. With Graves, you have the knockback as well as the armor stacking, so you don't take as much damage from the jungle camps, and you push back the camps so they don't touch you, so you have a very healthy clear, very fast clear, one of the fastest clearing junglers in the game. And Graves just, that kind of farming jungler, he does really well with the new jungle. And Morgana is the fastest farming jungler. Now, in case you guys didn't know, you can actually do your blue and your Grom together, and you can also do your red and your Raptors together when you clear. So that because of that, you're the fastest clearing jungler in the game. I have actually made a Morgana complete guide where I did show off like doing two camps together in the clear. So you'll go find that on my channel if you guys want to see how that clear works. But because of that, Morgana is really good now. But just that I still think that she does have the same issues that she had, which was that she's not the hardest carry jungler. Like, she is very utility. She has the root, she has the black shield, she has the dark, she has the chains on her ultimate, but really she doesn't have a lot of damage, and you can't hard carry the game if your whole team is feeding. Unlike maybe someone like Irelia, Xin Zhao, Graves, can hard carry your team way more than Morgana. So I don't think she's I don't quite think she's as good as them. Now, Wukong, I've moved him down from S to A+, and really there's only one reason for that, which is his horrible clear. Like, he already had a bad clear before when they removed his passive working on jungle monsters, and now that the jungle monsters gotten tankier, oh my, Wukong suffers a whole lot. Like, he's barely surviving clearing his jungle, and if anybody decides to invade him, he's done for. But if no one invades him, and for now the meta is no invading, he can clear his jungle just like staying at pretty low health the entire time. Then when he gets to level 5, he can go in for that huge gang, that huge dragon fight, that huge herald fight with his ultimate. So I still think he provides a lot of value to the team. Now, Jax, way better in jungle than top lane just because of how his weak early game is kind of mitigated by the fact he's not really picking fights, and he's in the jungle. He picks the fights he wants, he joins them, and he tries to get kills. Whereas in the top lane, you don't have a choice but to fight if the enemy engages onto you. Of course, you can try to run, but you get what I'm trying to say. With the new Demolish and the new Lethal Tempo, when you get to like 2 to 3 items, you start doing a lot of damage, and you become a huge split push threat. Even without going Hulkbreaker, you still are a huge split push threat. But of course, you know, be at the objectives when they spawn. Don't just split push top when like Dragon is spawning, because you are still the jungler, you still have the smite. So yeah. Now Echo, I really don't think he's very good in the jungle. Because of one main reason, he is squishy like a tissue paper. Like if you sneeze on him, he's just gonna die. Now when I tried clearing on Echo, and I nearly died to the red buff like at the very start of the game. And take note that red buff doesn't have any increased magic resist. It only has increased armor. Of course, my auto attacks do AD, but anyways, that's beside the point. He clears the jungle really horribly. Let's just put it at that. He doesn't clear the jungle very well. He's really squishy, but he does a whole boatload of damage. So if you can get yourself some good ganks, you get yourself a hit, get yourself fed, you can one-shot people really easily. So I still think he's A+, but his jungle clear is way too horrible for me to put him any higher. And Evelynn, basically one word, 2 words, control wards. So control wards basically just screw Evelynn over. And I have no idea why, but after this patch that control wards were added, I see Evelynn becoming so much more popular when she was really so good before control wards came out, but after control wards came out, she became so much more popular, but she's so much worse now. Like, it's so easy to spot Evelynn with a well-placed control ward. I really think her ganks are so much harder to set up now. But, you know, in solo queues, sometimes there's still confusion. Sometimes people don't take control ward. She still can work, so I still think she's in the A+ tier. Tryndamere, same deal as Jax. Really good late game. Lethal Tempo, Demolish, you know, destroy towers, split push, kill people. Good late games, weak early game, but mitigated by the jungle. So, not too bad. And, yeah. I still think Tryndamere not too bad in the jungle. The rest of the tier list basically remains the same. Malphite, Nasus, trash tier, horrible jungle clear. I don't even know. I haven't tested if they can even survive the first clear without a leash. But if I were to guess, I think Nasus will die on the first buff. Not too sure about that. But anyways, we're going to talk about the mid lane now. Okay, so mid lane, Irelia, in my opinion, still the best. If you are good on her, or at least half good on her, she destroys absolutely everybody. Diana, still absolutely amazing as well. Can hard carry your team. The new kid on the block in the S+ tier, Yasuo. Now, Yasuo absolutely insane with the new Lethal Tempo. Now, unfortunately, my prediction was wrong. He doesn't actually go Bloodthirster into IE. He actually now goes Stormrazor into IE, or Stormrazor into still like Blade of the Rune King or Wits, and despite having attack speed from getting from the Lethal Tempo, but he still needs Blade of the Rune King for like the lifesteal and such. So he is absolutely amazing with the Lethal Tempo. Like if you're against a good Yasuo with the Lethal Tempo, oh man, he goes in, auto attacks you so quickly, and he just destroys everybody basically. So Yasuo, I think, is great. Now I permaban Yasuo like every match, because I hate going against Yasuo as an ADC because of his win wall, and now that he's like, you know, an actual super good champion, is way worse. So now next up, Ziggs, still in the same deal. We don't have to go through him again. Karma, despite the nerfs, she's still absolutely OP. I actually do believe that even playing Karma mid, I think you actually build support, because Karma support is so much better than Karma mid. Like, as an AP carry, I really don't think she's that good, but as a support, she's amazing. I think that building a support build for Karma in the mid lane is better than building a carry build, in my opinion. But of course, most people still build carry build because everybody wants to carry. Zed moves down from the S+ into the S tier. I really just feel that like I really just feel like for some reason he's not really as popular, number one, and number two, it doesn't feel like he's as big of a kill threat. Now I know I said in the previous video that despite the nerf on his E, I still think he's a big kill threat, and I do think that that is the case. I don't think he's necessarily gotten worse. I just think that the 5 champions in the S plus series are clearly better than him, so I think he's like just one tier down basically. Galio did get a nerf slash buff on adjustment, I guess, on his W where it expands slower but it does more AP. So AP Galio even stronger, and Galio really good into AP as well. Now Echo I think is really good in the mid lane because even though he is squishy against melee champions like Katarina and Zed, he absolutely and Yasuo even, he kind of destroys them because his W zones them away from the minions, and you know he does insane bursts and he can fight people in the mid lane. But of course, as I say, he's still incredibly squishy, and you know sneezing on him, he will just die. So that is still his weakness. Gragas have actually moved down. Now the reason why I've done this is because basically Echo has kind of taken the Gragas niche of being a like one-shot burst mage. Like if you can basically one-shot burst people with Gragas, you can basically do the same thing with Echo just as easily. So I kind of think that because of that, Gragas is a little bit worse. Although Gragas AP in the jungle is better than Echo AP in the jungle because Gragas clear is better. But for the mid lane, I think Echo is just edge out Gragas just that little bit. Akali, of course, better in the mid lane than the top lane with the fleet footwork, but I still don't think she's as good as the S plus and S tier champion, so I still leave her in the A plus tier, but I do think she's a lot better this patch than she was in the previous patch. Now, A tier is still filled with a lot of those common mages. Seraphine nerf on her AP ratio, so even worse as a carry, and the rest of the tier list just basically remains the same. So now we can talk about my favorite ADCs. Alright, so ADCs actually now there are basically only 3 tiers of ADCs, like S plus, S, A plus, and A. I don't even think any ADCs are B now. I don't even think anybody is just like alright. I think every ADC now I think has its own niche, has its own place somewhere. So let's go from top down, because pretty much we're gonna have to cover everybody because Lethal Tempo changed the whole game for ADCs. Vayne, best Lethal Tempo user in my opinion, together with Jinx and Ashe, but Ashe just not good as a champion. So Vayne absolutely insane with the Lethal Tempo, destroys people, shreds tanks, destroys everybody else. Hardest carry ADC you can play in the game. Yeah, so Vayne absolutely amazing. Next, Kai'Sa, probably the second hardest carry ADC you can play in the game. Amazing Lethal Tempo user as well. Can still go for Conqueror. Just all around, just very good. Backline assassin, you know, front to back, team fighter shredding tanks. She can do it all. And Jinx, I still believe she's in the S plus tier. I know that no one else thinks that, but I really do. Especially now that she has the Lethal Tempo. With that Lethal Tempo, with that attack speed, with the Stormrazor rapid fire cannon and IE build, she's just a late game hyper carry absolute monster. Now, the only weakness is her lack of mobility and the fact you have to have amazing positioning. But if you can master positioning on ADCs in general, but especially on Jinx is gonna do wonders for you. No one is gonna really get close to you if you position correctly, and you can just free fire at everybody and just just easily get multi kills, pentakill maybe in somewhere in the future for you with the Jinx. So Jinx absolutely insane with the Lethal Tempo. Now next up we have Xayah and Caitlyn. Both of them have builds with Conqueror and Lethal Tempo. I will be coming up with a guide on them really soon. I think Caitlyn, I can do it in 1 or 2 days. Xayah a little bit further into the future. But both of them can take both Conqueror and Lethal Tempo. We will cover that more in my upcoming video, but they're absolutely insane. Xayah, of course, has the safety. Caitlyn, of course, has the range. And now, with a longer laning phase and with, the Lethal Tempo, Caitlyn absolutely bullies people in the lane. I've had so many matches where they're just stuck under the tower. They cannot even leave their tower. Basically, they're just permanently stuck under the tower. The only thing you need to look out for is, of course, ganks. So aside from that, Caitlyn is absolutely amazing. So is Xayah. Now Draven, I've always mentioned, I'll never take him out of the S tier, because if you're good on Draven, you can pretty much counter every ADC if you have enough skill and matchup knowledge on Draven. Now I have removed a lot of the APCs out because now lethal tempo ADCs are just so good. Most people won't play APCs anymore. But basically, Corki and Ziggs are your two like best options, along with like Orianna, who I just removed just so there is a lot less clutter. Your two best options for APCs, if your team has absolutely no AP, Corki and Ziggs are there to save the day. Now, Varus, I think, drops down from like the S tier just because everyone else is so much better. He didn't get any worse, but just that everybody else got so much better. He cannot take lethal tempo, so he really isn't that good. Lucian, still at the top of the A plus tier. Probably aside from Kai'Sa and Vayne, he's the third hardest carrying ADC, solo carry ADC. However, he cannot take lethal tempo. He can take Kraken Slayer and Conqueror. He doesn't benefit from Storm Razor, so really a lot of things in the meta working against him. But still, the fact of the matter is, if you can get yourself fed in the early game, he still destroys everybody. So Lucian still can hard carry a game. So A plus tier, great spot for him. Now, Tristana can go for both lethal tempo and Conqueror as well. Storm Razor, Abuser. If you get fed, you take over a game, a lot like a Lucian actually. So Tristana, I'm going to make a video on her really soon. But Tristana still does really well. Now Ezreal, I think, unfortunately, he doesn't take lethal tempo. He doesn't take Storm Razor. And he's pretty late game, so I really don't think Ezreal is that good at the moment. But Ezreal has a spot, because sometimes it's not important. The damage aspect of it is not important. The important part is the mobility. And really, there is no more mobile ADC than Ezreal. So Ezreal, I think, still has a spot in the meta. Same goes with Jhin. Now, the issue with Jhin at the moment is, although he can take lethal tempo, two issues. Number one, he can't take lethal tempo. And number two, he cannot burst lethal tempo users fast enough. Now, he's a very bursty kind of ADC, but he doesn't quite have enough damage unless you're Giga fed to like simply burst down a lethal tempo ADC, and you're just gonna get out DPS by the lethal tempo ADCs, and you're just gonna realize you expended your 4 shot, they still have 1 HP, and they're blasting you with their lethal tempo, and you're reloading and you just die. I had that happen to me quite a number of times, so I think Jhin got significantly weaker after the release of lethal tempo. And the double whammy is, number 2, Fleet Footwork got nerfed. So, or nerfed in aspect of Jhin. Now, Jhin does benefit from the mana, but what he really wants is that health and sustain in the lane. Because he doesn't get lifesteal from anywhere else. He doesn't go for Gluttonous Greaves because he goes for Boots of Swiftness. He doesn't go for Hunter Vampirism because he goes for Weakness to like make his damage, good. So, without the healing from the Fleet, his sustain is really, really affected. So Jhin a lot weaker now than when he was last patch. Now this is Farming Center. I think Farming Center is really good. We have Conqueror, not Conqueror. What am I talking about? We have Grasp, and then we go for like something like the Divine Thunder and the Black Cleaver. Of course, I covered her in the complete guide already, so look at that if you want to see. But I think Farming Center is pretty good. Next we have Ashe. So now Ashe, of course, with the lethal tempo, we just covered her in the updated complete guide recently. With the lethal tempo, she feels really good, but at the end of the day, she has a utility support. So, you don't really carry people with Ashe. Like, you really are trying to facilitating your teammates carrying you, and in solo queue, that's not quite a good thing. So, I don't think Ashe is going to be too good. I never think she's going to be too good, actually, because Ashe is always a utility marksman and not too much damage, but definitely way better. Ashe is definitely way better now than last time, which is why I moved her from B to A. Now MF, why did I move her down from A plus to A? Now I find that firstly in the current meta, she can't take lethal tempo, she can't take Storm Razor. That's already 2 huge knocks onto her. But number 2, like really, how many matches can you really pick Miss Fortune in? Like you really need to pick Miss Fortune like with like a Jarvan, with an Amumu, with a Seraphine, with somebody that can set you up. Like if you don't have any setup for your ultimate, you're not going to be doing much damage with your ultimate, and with the rest of your skills, you do a decent damage, but why not just pick another ADC that's not Miss Fortune? Really is the issue. Now, Akshan, way better in mid lane. He's like S tier in the mid lane. He's amazing in mid, but just not very good in bot. Because he cannot take advantage of like his range and his bullying potential like he can in mid. Farming Senna, worst ADC in the game. So now we can move on to talking about the supports. Okay, so in the support role, we have an Enchanter meta. Obviously, Karma is the best support. A lot of utility with her E, shielding with her, a lot of utility with her W, shielding with her E, speeds up with her E. CC on her ultimate and poking with her Q. Really, she has pretty much everything. Not the best peeler in the world, but Enchanter support wise, she's amazing. Same goes with Yumi. Yumi, invulnerable, insane healing and attack speed buff with her E. Really good utility ultimate, absolutely amazing. Now, the two worser but still great Enchanter supports are Nami and Lulu. Nami and Lulu a lot better peeling than Yumi and Karma, but Yumi and Karma a lot better enchanters, I think. Especially Yumi. Now Lulu, of course, is an amazing enchanter as well. Nami has the best disengage with her wave and her bubble. Really good peeling and all that. Really good lane presence as well. So all of these enchanters, really, you can't go too wrong with them. They're just all really good. I bumped Thresh down, not because he got any worse, but because enchanters are just so much better in the meta. Just because of how lethal tempo ADCs are now the meta, so you want enchanters to be buffing them up. You don't really need tanks to engage for them. You want enchanters to buff them up. They want that Ardent Sensor. They want that Harmonic Echo. They want that Staff of Flowing Water. They want enchanters to buff them up. So enchanters are really good at the moment. Now, Thresh, probably the best tank engage support, followed by Rakan and then Alistar. Now, Rakan we knew was good all along. And AP Rakan does an insane amount of damage if you want to go that route. If not tanky, Rakan is still great as well. Thresh, we don't have to discuss him anymore. Great, he does everything, engages, peels, everything. So, Alistar, I actually think I underrated him a tad, because I actually think that out of all the tank engage supports, obviously number 1, he's the most tanky. Number 2, he has the easiest to execute engage. And number 3, which I think is the most significant point, when you're playing from behind, on Alistar, you feel way better playing Alistar than, let's say, someone like a Leona. Leona is heart engage as well, tank engage support. But when you're behind on Leona, it feels like every time you go in, you're just feeding. Like for Alistar, with his ultimate and with his innate tankiness, but when you go in, when you're behind, you're not necessarily always going to die, just because you're so tanky. So it doesn't really feel like you're just feeding when you're behind. So I really think Alistar is actually a really good tank engage support. Now, why if I put Janna in the S tier, not in the S plus tier, not higher than the tank engage supports? While I think she's a good enchanter, I think all the S plus tier enchanters are way better than her in enchanting, but she's a hybrid of peeling and enchanter. So she's a all-round enchanter, but what she really excels at is peeling. With her tornado and with her monsoon, she's absolutely insane at peeling. Now think about her countering Alistar, Rakan, and a lot of other champions like Irelia, Lee Sin, Akali, so many other champions who are in the meta. Janna counters them all, so I think she definitely has to be in the S plus tier, but only when you're picking her as a counter pick against those champions that want to dive in. Braum kicked down to the A plus tier because it's an enchanter meta. He's like a vanguard. He's not a tank engage. He's just like protecting ADC, and instead of protecting your ADC, and your ADC would rather have someone to buff them up, an enchanter basically, than having a Braum. So that's really why I moved him down, and he's really not that good at the moment. So the rest of them, Lux. Now I see a lot of people rating Lux really low, but what I feel with Lux is that, firstly, Caitlyn is really, really good now. So Lux Caitlyn is one of the best aggressive bot lanes, with the Lux binding into Caitlyn, trap into like a ton of headshots from Caitlyn, and a full charge E from Lux. So one of the best aggressive supports for Caitlyn. And aside from that, I really think that just AP Lux in general, and in the support role, actually it does really well. I think it's being underrated by a lot. And her shield also, just building AP, her shield on her W is nothing to scoff at. I still think it's really significant, despite her getting a nerf on her shield eons ago when Lux support was meta. So I really think Lux support is pretty good now. Now Blitzcrank, one hook changes everything. And I think the buffs on Blitzcrank were really good. I think Blitzcrank has a place in the meta. Senna got quite a bit worse, because Senna does way better into tanks than enchanters, because she can get stacks from tanks a lot easier than enchanters. So Senna definitely a bit weaker, but then again, she's the hardest carry support for solo queue. So I'm still putting her in the A plus. Now I moved Soraka down because Grievous Wound's now really easy to get. A lot of people are rushing Executioners or Oblivion Orb, so Soraka and Sona definitely weaker in that aspect, because their main focus is healing. Now Sona I've actually moved up despite that, because I think Sona actually in late game does do really well. So I'm not putting her in A plus or anything. So I think A is an alright spot for her. I don't think she's quite as bad in B. But who have I moved down in B? Seraphine. So Seraphine, I think building support, I think is really bad. Building AP is a lot better, but her AP ratios got crushed on her Q and her E. So now she does like no damage, like when you go AP Seraphine. Not no damage, but you know, a lot less damage when you go AP Seraphine. And going support Seraphine kind of sucks. So Seraphine basically just there for her huge ultimate. Aside from that, she doesn't really do too well. And I think the rest we don't really have to discuss too much. So that will be it for the patch 3.2 tier list. Thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye.